Hi everyone and welcome to your daily tarot reading. Now today's reading is going to be a little bit complicated, so not very many people will know how to process it because this is a very delicate moment, especially from a psychological and even parapsychological perspective, because we have a very interesting, very unusual combination in the sky where Mars in Pisces, Pisces being our past, our subconscious, our hidden emotions, who we are at the very core of our beings, but from a timeless perspective. So basically, who we are at the core of our beings in any incarnation, in any lifetime, in the eternity of time. And Mars is the activator. Mars is our powers, our wills, our focus. And at the same time, Mars isn't alone here because the ruling planet of Pisces, Neptune, basically the source, basically the gateway to the divine, is in this part of the sky, and they're just starting to touch, they're just starting to get close to one another. And Mars is squaring. Square is a very hard aspect, a tension. The Sun, our ego, our sense of identity in this life, in the sign of Gemini. So it is that much conscious, it is that much grippable, palpable mentally in the present moment. And chances are this Mars is pretty much shattering, wiping the floor with our present egos, the egos that we have in this life. Everything that has to do with the ego that sources from education, from what we inherited from our families, from our cultures, anything that we added to it, basically who we wanted to become, who we identified ourselves with. And every time we identify ourselves with someone or something, yes, that partially is part of our inner truth, of course, but a part of that is also something we inherit from so very many sources: society, books, that things we read, movies, our ideals, our principles, our philosophies, and all of that. So this is the moment when that is basically stopped. This is where we have absolutely no choice but to be who we actually are without the ego, without the identity. This is where our RPG, personal roleplay in our existences, is shut down totally. And this is exactly the symbol of the Ace of Swords, because this is soul level, hardcore truth of who we are. And this changes absolutely everything, because this is where we just cannot delude ourselves, cannot fantasize, cannot play with our identities, cannot, play this very big tactical game of chess with life. This is where we just have to see, look at, and accept who we are without the ego, without anything. The brutal, the raw, the unrefined us. And of course, this state is not going to last for very long. So this isn't something we can upkeep all the time. This isn't something that we could accomplish at any given moment of our lives, because that would just make us, inhuman. That would be unhealthy. But we do have this moment, we do have this window of opportunity offered to us by the dance of Mars and Neptune, and this is going to be much more intense in the next weeks. And yes, absolutely, this is frightening, this is uncomfortable, this is shocking, depressing. This is the moment when we can just feel an inner chaos ripping us apart, but at the same time, that is a choice, because all we need to do is just sit down with ourselves and accept the truth of who we are, accept the truth of who we came here to be, because partially, of course, that is the quest of life to figure it out, but a part of that is instinctual, primordial, so we kind of know who we are deep inside ourselves, deep in our gut. So it takes a moment like this for us to align with that. regardless if it's in our liking or not. So this moment is very, very important, not to figure out what we want to experience, what we want to do, who we want to become, the future we would like to live, but rather quite the opposite. This is a very important, very, very pivotal moment of figuring out who we don't want to become, what we don't want to live, what we would not like to accept, anything that we would not like to integrate within ourselves. So basically, this is the moment when something inside of us strongly, even for some people quite aggressively, just vomits out all the illusions, all the things that don't belong to us, our false desires, everything that has to do, for example, with lust, because for some people, love and lust are the same thing, and that's why their lives are the way they are. But this is a moment when this becomes that much clear and obvious. This is the moment when you just can't hide under the mask of your profession. This is when, you're a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, a nurse, or whatever. That's absolutely fine. But this is when you figure out, well, that is the role you play. That is your RPG in this life. But it's not who you are really. It is what you choose to do. And even if it is part of your soul calling, your life path, it's still not who you are. It is just what you're working with. And of course, another very delicate way how this energy is gonna play out, or is playing out in the very present moment, well, then some people, this moment, this second in time, can look at their life partners, their lovers, their concubines, whatever, their partners. It doesn't even have to be romantic. It can be any kind of long-term partnership, contractual, co-worker, boss, whatever, anyone that is an active part of our lives. This is when we look at them with the eyes of total honesty and total clarity, and this is the moment when we can gaze deep towards their souls and see the truth there. And this, of course, changes everything. Because some people can choose to be generous, some people can choose to be really kind, really appreciative, really loving, but that can be just a masquerade. And when we are the beneficiaries of that masquerade, they just put everything in our lives on a silver tray, while we mistake that for love, and we are willing to tolerate anything for that person because they always treat us that way. So, But of course, this can play out the exact opposite way, where they deep inside are really loving and gentle and fragile people, but are always assertive and a little bit venomous. And now we can see the true vulnerability and true love inside of them, and this can also change everything. So chances are the biggest effect that this energy is going to be having immediately is on our relationships. I'm not saying that terminations are gonna happen in an instant, but this is where, certain truths are gonna hit us, Ace of Swords, like a lightning bolt. Mars sextile Uranus. Uranus is the objective, unmasked, raw truth. So this is going to be a very, very, very shocking moment, and this shock comes from deep within us. It is the manifestation of the inner truth when it is not us going deep within us or digging or whatever or asking questions. It is when it just surfaces, blows up like a volcano, regardless of our preferences, choices, what we are doing in the present moment, how our lives are, how well or unwell we are. This is gonna be a moment of truth. Of course, it is not an easy energy, it is not pleasant, it is not nice whatsoever, because you need a lot of emotional and any form of intelligence to see this for what it is. For people who are not that aware, are not that open, don't have that much self-knowledge, this can feel like hell, basically, because inner truth, the truth of your soul, is basically subjective. It is only objective to you. To anything else, even the divine, even reality itself, it is still subjective. But this is exactly why this inner voice, so to speak, is gonna be so strong that it will eclipse everything else, and that's how you will know that you have found your heart's true desire, your heart's true wish, purpose, your truth, basically. And this is just a big work of progress until that Mars meets Neptune in the sky in the next couple of weeks. But before it gets to that, we have a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius sitting on top of the Great Attractor, which is basically the divine mind, so to speak, very simply put. It is just like the consciousness of God, and that is also very revelatory energy. That is also going to dish out the truth one way or another. So this is a moment when we have to brace ourselves, not just for inner chaos, but for outer chaos. But the more you know yourself, the more you're open to yourself, the more you know psychology, the easier it is going to be for you to process it. And of course, ultimately, you will have to help others. And that is exactly the message of the Three of Cups. You are going to be the guiding light for your friends, family, everyone who is part of your circle, who is part of your reality, who is part of your heart one way or another. But at the same time, it also signifies that aligning with the truth and just finding clarity, finding out what everything that you do not want, because sometimes that is so much more important than what you truly want. Because what you do not want but think you want is a big obstacle, is a big shackle. It is like, falling into an ant colony and the ants are just ripping you apart from million different directions, because that is basically the society we live in. Each and every day of our lives we see 10 million adverts, so of course we don't know what we want and we don't want in a true way. Our wishes and desires are even 10 million miles distant from us, because we grew up in a world where everything is a big advert. Everything is about business. Everything is about what you would need in your life. Let me advise you how to make your own life better, easier, nicer, smell nicer, look nicer, whatever. You have migraines, you have joint pains. Well, don't worry, I have a pill for everything. So, even a grandmaster, even an enlightened soul, even someone who is just a baby step away from total enlightenment, if forced to live in this life 24/7 for 50 years, let's say, well, can we actually condemn ourselves and everyone else in this life that we don't know our true desires from our false desires? But it doesn't really matter, because the universe is infinitely intelligent, it is wise beyond comprehension, and it is loving, and that's why it sends moments like this in our lives, especially collectively, when everyone has to go through the same thing, to make it that much easier for us to remove the adverts, to remove the manipulation, to remove the falseness in an instant, in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months, opposed to when were fed with this all our waking lives. So the advertising companies may have figured everything out 1,000,000%, but they didn't calculate that the universe can also intervene at the time of its choosing, and this is that time. So this is where the masks fall off, and there's no way to stop it. No one can stop it. It doesn't matter what technology you build. It doesn't matter what psychological methodology you perfect to manipulate people. This is the moment when you are fighting with eternity, with infinity, with something which is infinitely bigger than you. So you have no chance. Do invent what you want, the universe is still gonna defeat you. And that is why I personally don't really fear anything. No cabal, no shadow agenda, no deep state. Okay, they're efficient, they're smart, they have everything figured out, they have allies, they're perfectly well off, yet when they have to fight the universe, when they are not in flow with the universe but against it, then is the moment when I truly have absolutely nothing to fear from. You know, their success is also due to the universe because something had to inspire them to come up with the technology, the plans, and all that. And of course, partially, you know, the manipulation and keeping people under control, it was, you know, rational, was logical, it was needed, because otherwise the world would be a big anarchy and serial killers would run loose without being challenged by anyone. So of course they were aided by the universe on one hand to, you know, establish methodologies for control, for mass control. But when it became too heavy, when it stopped evolution, when it became perverted in the eyes of the universe, well, then is the moment when it says stop and reconfigure it, stop, refine it. And if they fight against it, well, this is what happens, and it's very obvious who the winning side is. And that is exactly the message of the Three of Wands, because this is the divine blessing of clarity. Just that this is, you know, once more, we expected something, and our expectations, not even our spiritual expectations, were met because we expected to be aligned with who we are authentically, blah blah blah. But that's not how it happened. The way it happened is that we were aligned with everything that doesn't match, everything that we do not love, everything that we hate. All of our illusions had to be lived step by step in order for us to eliminate it, for us to hate it, for us to be sick of it. It's like there's two ways of, you know, preventing a child from getting diabetes. One is you give him a handful of sweets and allow it to make himself sick, and then he knows for a fact that measure is needed. Or you can just torture him for the rest of his childhood, saying no, 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 no sweets for you. And you know, which is the easiest way? You know, the first way is a little bit cruel, so to speak, but it gets the job done lovingly. And the other one, you love the child infinitely, and you want to prevent the sickness, but you still come through as a cruel taskmaster. So the universe, in its wisdom, chose the first. If we want our illusions, if we like them so much, well then here it is. Choke on it, and we choked on it. And that is exactly why now we are shedding it off. Everything that is not us, everything that we hate, everything that annoys us, repulses, everything that doesn't belong in our reality is being vomited out by us. And that is why this moment is so depressive, so difficult, and that is why we cannot see the future whatsoever, because that Ace of Wands, the true future is not a future which you plan. A true future is the great unknown. When the settlers, you know, willingly risk sailing in uncharted waters to explore the world. That is our job. And not to have a concrete plan and rigidly stick to it obsessively. Because if we succeed, then because of our obsession, because of all the unhealthy sacrifices we had to make for our plans to be in control 24/7, well, the end result will dissatisfy us because we won't have any love in our hearts anymore to appreciate. May it be our own efforts, may it be just our plans coming together, we couldn't appreciate that. So this is why, isn't it better to wish for a life of unknown mystery, a life which we cannot even anticipate, and just embrace it like a child embraces a new playground, rather than to obsessively stick to our plans. So this is where the universe is actually not asking us for surrender. This is where we are begging the universe for it to accept our surrender. So guess who is the smarter cookie out of this, us or the universe? I think again the universe has won this game of chess with all of us, with humanity. And it didn't matter how smart, how evolved, how studied, how learned, how enlightened we were, whatever we did in the past, because we're still in the same boat and everyone is basically equal regardless of our achievements, of our diplomas, of our great spiritual wisdom, of our paranormal and supernatural powers. Because at the end of the day, what did we accomplish with them? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that is exactly, for example, me personally, am never proud of my gifts and abilities, because if I'm proud of them, what do I show the world? Oh, look everyone, I'm a circus freak. Come and see me. That's not what I want in my life. I'd rather stay in and be a toilet cleaner for the rest of my life and know that I can use my abilities to help anyone I choose and not anyone pays me. So there was a time in my life when I was really, really upset and angry at the universe, because why can other people be successful and not me? Well, this is when I see that not being successful was the biggest blessing in my life, because I never ever wanted success. It is something which is insignificant to me, and I basically idolized other people on the internet, and that was my desire and not my true desire. It never came from my soul. So this is a very powerful, very hard, very confusing energy which depresses some people, enrages some people, drives people insane. It can even trigger people to do extreme acts against themselves, but ultimately, this is the truth. And the reading is closed by the Ten of Cups reversed and the Lovers, and it represents that this energy is basically targeting relationships most of all. It's not that it wants to destroy relationships, because true love, true soul level alliance, appreciation cannot be touched by anything, not even the universe. The universe made love so powerful that it's powerful than it, if that makes sense. So it doesn't even want to have any power over it. But this is where relationships out of commodity, relationships out of, what's in it for me, toxic relationships, manipulative relationships, and I say, not just romantic or partnerships, it can be anything: contracts, co-workers, business partners, neighbors, best friends, etc. These are gonna be massively challenged in these couple of days, so prepare yourself. Prepare yourself for truth. Prepare yourself for not being able to resist anything else but to speak your truth. If there's pain in your heart, you're definitely gonna express it without any fear of judgment or anything like that. So basically, this will reshape the landscape of our emotional worlds and our relationship in the next coming weeks, and that is almost certain. But if we just look at the bigger picture, a country, a culture, power players on the world stage can be seen just like individuals, just like people. So all of this is gonna happen at the same time on the world stage, where countries and nations and cultures are also gonna change their relationships with one another. And perhaps this is like a better news, because ultimately, when it comes to countries, when it comes to nations, when it comes to the international worlds, harmony is a necessity. So maybe this is a good news in that perspective. Well, thank you so much for listening. You hope that you can somehow find the strength not to allow this energy to tear you apart. As I said above, it's like falling into an ant colony where the ants are just ripping you away from 10 million different angles. So this can be really painful and confusing for some people. And this is the dichotomy. Sometimes clarity is more confusing than our fantasies, but it is what it is. If you are struggling very, very hard, please reach out, because there definitely are people out there who are willing to help, who are willing to listen, so you're not alone in this. Thank you so much again. Everyone, a blessed and safe day. Until next time, bye for now.